once I started taking photos for this other broker, it came back to me that, whoa, I have a talent in this. And from there, I just kept on. It snowballed, and then I was presented the opportunity through my work to work on a larger scale, and I started getting bigger and bigger clients.
Welcome to Architecture, Design, and Photography. Today we have a little bit of a different setup in that Peter Morneau
That's right.
Contacted me through Instagram and said, hey, you want to grab coffee? And I was like, why don't we turn it into a podcast? So, hey.
I know. I was like, wow, okay, let's do it.
Oh, you got to keep that online content rolling. So,
Right.
So what's up?
Not much. I've been a professional photographer for several years now.
Tell me about yourself,
Sure.
since this is really the first
Why
time
not?
we've met.
Yeah. So for past few years, I've been a professional photographer with commercial, real estate photography, interior design, stuff like that. And it's really taken off recently, and been a great career for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, what were you doing before that, and how did you get into that?
Well, interesting. I was a real estate agent, a real estate broker
okay.
beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
How'd you like that?
I liked it, except there was a 24 hours a day, on call type job, and during that process, I started doing some photography.
Sure.
And really enjoyed it. And some oddities came along, or maybe not so odd, which is that a lot of people were saying, "Oh, these are great photos.
These are great. Could you shoot my project for me?"
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of how it all started.
Yeah.
Where one broker said, "Could you photograph my place?" And I started off with, your very basic computer and very basic camera, very, nothing fancy. And then as the more jobs came in and progressed, I just started to upgrade my equipment.
Sure.
And,
now, how do you, seeing that this will be a more photography-based architecture, design, and photography.
yes.
Let's get a little weird and technical on gear. Like, what do you do for gear and everything else?
I love these questions. I could talk about this all day. And so I use a Nikon D850.
Yep.
And then I have 3 lenses that I like to cycle through, which is a 14 to 24 and a 24 tilt shift, 24 millimeter
now,
tilt shift. Now,
Nikon has tilt shift lenses as well?
That's right. Yeah, and they just came out with a new one, which is the 19 millimeter. And that is a pretty hefty one, and brand new, I believe, in 2018. So
I've been all Canon for as long as I've been shooting, and just recently upgraded to medium format Fuji, which is kind of scary and very different in all the technical way that it works. But I've really enjoyed the Canon tilt shift lenses, but I have an adapter that I can throw those lenses on the Fuji, and from what I've researched, people are getting pretty good results, but I'd love to be able to get just an adapter that I can then use Fuji lenses that all I need is the rise, fall, and shift.
Right.
I very, very rarely ever use the tilt of the lens to move the focus plane.
Yeah, same here.
So if they just had that, that's all I'd really need, and then I could shift over to having really just like the 23, the 32 to 64, and then the 110 that Fujinon makes for that camera system. But yeah, anyways, kind of a steep learning curve on that one. But so you use Nikon gear, and do you use a lot of added lighting in your work, or no? Or?
Sometimes it's all very transitional for me, as far as I'll be using natural light, and then sometimes I'll need to pull in some additional flash pops here and there.
Tim and I were just going through a project where it was a mill renovation. And they just couldn't get the lights off, and it's a really difficult post-production process to make something look very refined and true to the experience. If you have the incandescent lights or very warm lights on, but then you have very cool light coming through the windows, and and especially when you have like brick red walls and yellow ceilings, and then you have all these different color temperatures bouncing around. It's really, really difficult. And then if you're on like a time crunch and then you've got like a guy running around all these electrical panels, seeing if it's one of those things. It's just like,
That's the nightmare of our work. Or at least I consider it to be. It's the color casts, and all the different lighting sources.
Yeah, the common thing. If I can, in another project too, we were just kind of like trying to figure that out. You can overpower a lot if you have strobes, but then you're taking so much time on set if you don't have a flat white ceiling to utilize those strobes. So if you're in a renovated mill with yellow ceilings because it's just sandblasted wood, and they can't get the incandescent lights off, and you have this natural light coming in, you've got to then try and suspend like a huge white sheet or something up there, a scrim, to bounce that off of, to balance all that out, and it's just it can be such a nightmare.
Huge task, and I think a lot of people, when they think about commercial photography, specifically architectural photography, they think I'm gonna grab a camera and I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna start doing this, And once you do that, I mean, of course, that's how a lot of people start. That's how I started. I had no formal education, and
well, no one's gonna get hurt by capturing images.
Yeah,
if you mess up that part of it, I mean, sure, you could maybe catch something on fire and, all that kind of stuff, sure. But it's not, I mean, at the end of the day, we're selling flowers, really. No one really needs what we do. But that's that interesting thing where those things that are this very subjective kind of selling flowers to a degree, you can make, if you're good at it and you do it right, you can make a really good living off of it, or it can be but it's very hard to get into that realm of it, but you can get by it as well. It's interesting. Like architects are, for the most part of what architects do, they're unneeded, which sounds like a horrible thing to say. I get it, but 4 walls and a roof to keep the rain out is like what a lot of people are going to say, this is my base need here and I'm good, And so, how much of the population actually uses architects? Very, very, thin margin that actually uses architects. But what they do brings so much value to the table, in my opinion. And I feel the same way about, representing architecture to your potential clients brings so much value to the table when you're hiring a professional to do that, that's, skilled at what they do.
Yeah, I see that. I see, the only thing I would say is I do feel like photography is so integral to the, online presence of all these businesses.
Oh, huge, yeah.
It's just such an impact on,
But there's no law that you have to have it.
That's right, you don't.
And you can, so many people are like, well, my nephew's got a Nikon. I don't need to hire Peter.
Definitely.
And so the interesting thing that I come to is like, all right, whatever it is that this person does and has, invested all this money in their education and building their own business, blah, 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 all that, millions of dollars eventually. And that comes to this one interaction of representing what they do to their potential client. That one thing that's going to be the very tip of the spear is going to be the photographic representation or video representation of what all that work that they've done. It's going to be that tip of the spear. And if you've got an extremely dull tip of the spear that flies awkward, that's getting your nephew who's got the Nikon to sharpen your spear for you before battle. It's
I
a
like
bad
that
idea.
analogy. That's really intense. But and with that, if you're going to a client, let's say you're an architect and you go to a client and you have your portfolio, let's say you're missing some of the best work you've done and you don't have photographs for that. That's where I think it's going to make or break you.
Oh, yeah.
Being able to represent that with photos such, the photos you do, for instance, very clean, crisp, and I'm sure people hear that all the time, those definitions or ways to describe a photo, but you have very minimal color casts, the image feels very clean, And that's what I try to do with my work and provide for my clients as well. And I think when they go into a meeting with a potential client, if they have the right photos, they're going to be able to portray that work
Oh yeah.
in a way that's going to get them the business.
Yeah, it's like
you know?
occasionally I put on a piece of clothing that I just don't agree with. And I tell myself
Okay.
to just get over it. And all throughout the day I go through with this like
Like, it's
odd,
not
like
right.
this is
It's
not me. I
it's
don't
not
like
me.
it. I don't.
Yeah.
And I think if a business person, architect, whoever is going into a meeting with a photo that they don't feel great about, it's kind of that same thing where they're like, they're putting all their, all their vibe out there, like we're the great, whatever, and we're really passionate about what we do, blah blah blah. But this photo doesn't really represent us well. It's like
Right.
that. So.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's why we get the calls, is because perhaps their nephew did try to take some photos.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of my best clients have been the ones who've gone cheap on representing their work, and then realized like, oh,
Right.
there's the value,
Right.
So I had a situation where I submitted an estimate, and someone else, I don't know who it was, submitted an estimate. They went with the cheaper estimate, and they had to vacate their office for the day and bring staging and everything in. They lost huge amounts of money to just get to the point of being able to do the photo shoot, and then they had to pay the photographer, and the results they got back didn't work for them.
Right.
And so they had to then stage the whole thing again, kick everyone out of the office for the day again,
Yeah.
and pay my exorbitant fee in addition to what they
Massive
already
fee.
Right. So, I felt bad
Right.
for them, but they've been an incredible client ever since.
Yeah.
I
I get that.
So,
I had a situation just like that. I submitted an estimate, and they came back and they said, that doesn't make sense to me. The person we used in the past is this. I couldn't help myself. I had to check their website.
Right.
And I said that is why they would charge that,
Right.
because there's some issues here and there. But, each to their own. I think the relationship building is a huge part too,
yeah,
Really.
I've had to rely more strong. I've had to lean into trying to produce the best work I can more than relationship building, because I'm not that friendly and sociable of a person.
Okay. I like that
So,
honesty. That's great.
I mean, there's not a lot of people who are going to, say, boy, Trent's just really so much fun to be around and talkative and
Guy's a
and
blast.
warm, and yeah,
Cool.
there's a small acquired taste for people that can put
Yeah.
up with me. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, all right.
But
Trent's not running for mayor.
I've interacted and observed other photographers that are just so much better at that, that are just better salespeople to a
Right.
degree, and just have that ability to, sell snow to an Eskimo.
I get it. And for social events myself, small talk, sometimes I'll get a little caught up and I'll be like, should I really talk about the weather again? But
Are you good at that kind of thing?
I can fake it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
can't
what does
fake
a
it.
social person look like? And
Yeah.
then I'll get into that mode.
Can't do that. I just
Yeah.
100%. I'll just be quiet.
Yeah.
And awkward, and they're like, I don't ever want to be around that guy again.
Yeah, you two are standing there and it's complete awkwardness.
Or I
no one
just
has
find
anything
the
to say.
one person I know, and I'll just go and tag along behind them the
And
whole
then
time.
follow them
and
for-
then they're
yeah.
just kind of like, I have to meet other people. Can you go away?
The
So-
next time they totally avoid you. Yeah. No. I'll go to some events and I find that if I go to them over and over again, it gets easier for me because
Yeah,
we'll get
imagine.
acquainted and then now I have a couple friends. But a lot of my business and I think you'd probably agree is from doing a good job and other people hearing about it.
Yeah, I mean, word of mouth. If someone, and I experienced this in my own trajectory of my career so
Yeah.
far, is that initially people will inquire about hiring you, and they'll get an estimate and they'll like, can you do it for less?
Yeah.
Or they'll just not call back. Or if they do use you, then they'll come in and be very, they'll monitor the whole situation,
Right.
and they'll have a lot of opinions that they feel that they have to interject. And
That
and
really
then,
hurts my creative flow, you know?
yeah, and then then as you keep working, as you get clients that are that you have been recommended to, that come to you because they heard about you from someone else, they don't question your fee as much. They don't try and control overly a shoot as much. Obviously, we're commercial photographers. I will usually give my opinion about twice, and if the client still wants to go the way they want to go, that's fine. I'm not,
Right.
I'm not an artist solely. I'm a commercial artist.
Do you stick with them after they make that decision?
Yeah, yeah.
Usually,
If they truly make that decision, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't have a moral vision
Right.
that has to be communicated in these images.
Do you have a
I can
line?
choose to put those
Yeah.
images on my website and represent them or not. But if they, overseeing their brand, say, no, we need the pillow to be chopped rather than,
I love
I'm
a
like,
chopped pillow
yeah.
too. I'm a big fan.
So-
I maybe invented that. Don't quote me, but
So, it's not, I don't have that much skin in the game
Right.
for that kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
realize that I'm not solely selling my vision. I'm overlaying my vision on top of what someone else has already put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into. That's an extremely important thing, I think, to remember and to keep in mind, is that at the end of what you produce, what you create, if someone looks at it and says, wow, what a great photograph, you failed. What someone needs to look at, or what someone needs to be thinking when they look at a photograph that you produce of architecture is, wow, what amazing architecture. And that's a real subtle thing there, right? If you play so many photographer games and have such a strong photographer voice of doing these little, things that are like lighting tricks and, if you make it too much of a photograph and less of a representation of architecture in that realm of architectural photography, I think you've failed. And that's just my own opinion.
oh sure.
I have a lot less. I try and have a quieter voice, a more silent representation of architectural work.
Do you have any big influencers as you're getting into the game?
I would say the big influence for me was like more kind of Scandinavian minimalist architecture,
Okay.
which everything about it is minimal, and it's quiet, it's silent, it's serene in that, and it's fairly rigid to a large degree, and it's usually very a little more single directional light and very controlled light sources generally. And that, just from architecture school, seeing those kind of things influenced what I wanted to design, and then hence what I want to see and what I want to shoot when I'm producing images. So that was a huge, I think, influence for me. Photographically, no one. I
Yeah.
don't know that much about other photographers, and I, to a fault, or I just don't follow other photographers in my region or really in my, that I would compete with or anything else, because emotionally, as a self-employed creative, it's a very difficult thing to watch other people get work that you could have had.
Right. I get
So
that. Yeah.
It's
Sure.
that's just a completely morale protection thing for me. So I generally don't look through the magazines that I contribute to, and unless it's for like me needing to more clearly understand maybe the repetition of the article that they're wanting me to contribute to and the voice of that specific article and how we should capture it or something, I'll do that. But I generally don't pick up and go through publications. So
I in the past I haven't done that. I think recently, in maybe the last year, 8 months or something like that, to be too specific, I've looked at other magazines. I'm saying, okay, what's going on right now? And but when I first started, I had no practice. I had no experience. I just kind of just grabbed the camera and went with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I basically did the same thing. I had from architecture school, I learned how to use Photoshop to put architectural presentations together. And so I knew I had, I put together a tripod, camera, and like 2 strobes.
Okay.
And like 1 or 2 lenses.
That's pretty nice.
And I went and I tried to use the strobes, and I was like, this isn't working. This looks horrible. I don't know what these things are doing or why they're doing it. Or
do I point it right at it?
Yeah, and I pointed at it, and I wouldn't understand why it this looks horrible and harsh. But every time I would just let the shutter drag and get like a long natural light exposure, I was like, ooh, that looks really nice.
Those work really well, yeah.
But the lack of dynamic range and everything that I was capturing wasn't working. So I was like, all right, I could do these things will perfectly overlay if and so I just kind of developed a practice of bracketing, which is taking multiple exposures.
Right.
And then in post, not just toggling some switches, but actually by hand putting them together and making sure that everything looks actually how you see it. I would do that. And it developed a look that I was like, all right, that's what I've seen before. That's what I like. And, how can I push this and move it? And how can I use these lights to help complement that look and feel?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I went to school for that. Now, in the beginning, when I started out, I did look through a lot of publications and read a lot of books on just photography and the different, tricks and everything else that you can do to achieve desired results.
Right.
And I would cut out any image I saw that I gravitated towards. I would just cut out, tape on the wall, and
that's great.
And try and I'd look at it and try where did they add light here? How did they do that?
Right.
And how did they get that feel? And
cutting it out and putting it on the wall, that reminds me of the 80s or something.
Yeah, right. Now everyone would just have a Pinterest board. The thing I liked is you actually had it there looking at you every time you went into the office to do something.
Right.
Yeah.
When I first started, I can remember my first creative process with photography. It was when I was in high school. My friend John and I, we had just a disposable camera, and we went to this construction site. Right, and we climbed up on the construction vehicle. It was after hours, and this is not a true story for the record. But we climbed up on these construction vehicles and put on the hard hat, and I took pictures of him, and he took pictures of me, and we just thought we had so much fun just playing around, looking like we were real construction workers.
As a kid, I remember climbing on those things, and actually they would start, and I was like, whoa!
Oh no! Yeah, I didn't press any buttons when I was up there.
I did.
Yeah,
that was a bad idea.
Oh, I bet it was. Yeah, and then it's like, how do I turn this up?
Yeah.
What do I do with it now? What's the next step? But yeah, I always had a creative mind, and as I grew older, I kind of tried to push that aside and become more mainstream with my life, like getting a 9-to-5 job,
Sure.
Seeing how I could participate in what I considered to be a normal lifestyle.
Now,
right?
why did you do that, and why did you maybe want to or not want to do that?
Well, I think, I've got dyslexia, right? And I've always had trouble in school. And so I think I had something to prove that I had this normal, that I could fit in. Right?
You could be someone you weren't if you tried really hard.
That's right. And it was like going against the grain. It was a really difficult choice, and because my mind was wired to be creative. And, I remember talking to my dad one day, and he said, Pete, I always felt like you should have gone, to college, to be creative, you know, and because I went to school for psychology, which helps me out quite a bit.
Oh, that's,
you know, with clients.
I love psychology.
Yeah.
It's interesting. But
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, let's see, two of the most favorite classes for me in college were like very low level psychology class.
Sure.
And then interpersonal communications class.
Yes.
Like I learned a lot about all the stuff I was doing wrong.
Oh, Trent, you're doing great right now. You
Yeah.
got it. You got it. You picked up something along the way. But yeah, so once I started taking photos for this other broker, right, it kind of came back to me that, whoa, I have a talent in this.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I just kept on. It snowballed, you know, and then I was presented the opportunity through my work. You know, this is, I think...
Through your work as a real estate agent?
No,
or?
as a photographer.
Yep.
You know, to work on a larger scale. And I started getting bigger and bigger clients. You know, so on top of being a commercial, you know, architectural photographer, I also... some of my main work is with Sotheby's.
Yep.
So I photograph most of the listings in southern Maine. And
Cool.
that keeps me very busy.
Yeah.
You know. But then it just started expanding into publications, commercial.
Sure. So when you shoot for architects or publications compared to real estate,
Oh, totally
what's your
different
different
ballgame.
approach?
Yeah, completely different ballgame. So with real estate, it is it's quick pace, fast pace. I mean, even though like a lot of places that I photograph are 4,000 up to 6,000 square feet oceanfront homes, right? So it still takes me, 5 hours to photograph the property, and but it's a different concept. What I'm trying to do is work with the light that I have. I don't have the luxury of waiting around for the time of day that best suits the property. I need to get in there and I need to photograph the property as it is, and as a photographer, lighting and natural lighting is such a huge benefit. And, so I go in, I photograph. I'm focusing more on the flow of the property and what's included with the property.
Right.
So a lot of that work is about, as someone buying a house, what are they going to get out of that property?
Right.
And what does it look like to be there?
See, it's interesting to me how influenced your photographic approach is, how strongly influenced because of your background as a real estate agent, where when I initially was coming to a project, I was, 100% informed by my background as an architect,
Right.
And it's interesting how that just sits in the back of your mind and is like, what you're doing, and I've said this before, I guess, that as a photographer, I mean, anyone can point a camera and push a button.
Definitely.
It's about, what it's really about is your background in your life experience, that it's you sharing what you see,
That's
and
right.
To learn the technical ball game of photography is not why you get paid.
Right.
It 100% isn't. And that's why the nephew with the Nikon is, next to worthless.
That's right.
I mean, it'll produce a technically better image that holds together, but you're translating your lived experience and all of your problem solving capabilities, your subjective experience of life. You're just putting those into single frames and how you would look at something. So when you go to hire a photographer, you're asking, can you show other people how you see this?
Right.
Is what people are doing. Yeah,
and I think it's an innate ability that, some of the most successful photographers have, especially in architectural photography. The photo that you're taking, it's, a direct representation, like you were saying, of what you're seeing. And to have that sight of, okay, what looks good? How can I make these columns look interesting, intriguing? Given in a certain situation, you might have a different approach for what you're looking for out of the image. But how do I find emotion in a blank wall? And I think a lot of that comes naturally. So your success, my success in this business, is being able to see the beauty and the creativity that we're able to bring in.
Right.
That nephew cannot do.
Right. Well,
With
nephew
fingers
might be
crossed.
able to do.
Yeah,
Eventually.
computer might be able to do it eventually. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. There's I mean, I look at, I'm constantly looking at I'm constantly thinking about what's going to make me
next?
go under.
Oh,
How am I
yeah.
going to fail?
Oh, that's tough.
Right?
Yeah.
I've just got that voice in my head that's, you're going to fail.
Right. Your wife's like, what are you thinking about? You're like, just how I'm going to fail. I don't know. It's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you know, that's why I expanded into doing video. One, it's just creatively, it's a whole different ball game,
Right.
and it's a whole different technical problem, whole different creative problem, which is really interesting and invigorating. But it's also, if you can't provide that along with still imagery, that's going to be a tick against you.
Right.
And to be able to provide it along with still imagery is a huge benefit for potential clients.
I get that request a lot.
Yeah.
You know, can you pair this with a video? And
Yep.
and you know, that for me, I'm on that path of trying to bring that in for my clients. And at the same time, I'm not trying to represent myself as someone that has a lot of experience with
Right.
videography.
Yeah, no, I have a big client
Yeah.
that they hire us primarily for still photography,
Yeah.
but they also know that we can do very controlled movement reproduction of what we already staged for the still photo.
Right.
And so I'm not able to charge a huge amount of money to just come in and do video production at this point, but it's
Right.
definitely something that, you know, we can do architectural videography in a controlled atmosphere, and we can do it very well. And that's a different thing than really shooting like lifestyle in a very active environment and everything else. That's just not something that we've had a lot of experience with at this point.
Right.
And it's not something I'm trying to get more work
Yeah.
around at this point.
Yeah, I
But-
can get some anxiety around lifestyle.
Yeah, it's just such a.
videography.
Well, I mean, it's like being a wedding photographer compared to being an architectural photographer.
Well,
As an
people
architectural
yeah,
photographer, you're kind of God for the day.
Right.
It's like, everyone leave me alone. I'm going to control
I
everything.
love that. I love that.
You know, and it's like you
Yes.
and maybe one other person, and you just get to produce and think about and just get everything in line.
It's the best feeling.
And
People
it's
have
nice.
asked me for wedding photography, or doing, you
Yeah.
know, because some people see a photographer as a universal. You know, you can do
Yeah.
everything from pets to weddings to
and
portraits.
You can do it,
You
but
do
can
have
you
the
do
technical
it well?
skill, yeah.
You know, it's people that do wedding photography and do it well. It's for me to look at that. It's like an extremely difficult thing that
Yes.
I would not want to do because it would feel so incredibly just stressful.
Raw,
to,
yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, the first architectural shoot I tried to do, I completely failed at and left.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, no one was paying me, and I was there
that's
by
nice.
myself.
Yeah.
So I had that luxury, but I got access to a nice location and went and tried to shoot it, and it was so the horsepower tax on my brain to think in that manner. I was shooting the inside of something. It was like I had stuck a camera in someone's body, and I was trying to find
Yeah.
like, this does not compute.
You're
And I was
going
trying
deep,
to
yeah.
frame up interior spaces, and I had never approached that before visually thinking about that, like framing that up. And it was so difficult, but I gave up that time, and I had, access to a nice location, but I just, couldn't do it that day anyways.
Right.
And luckily I kept at it, and I started to kind of find like, oh, if I start by just going full on square everything up
Right.
first, and if that's great, great. But if not, start to move off axis with certain things. Start to move pieces around. Think about the lights. Start with getting all the lights off and seeing what the natural light
Right.
does. There's ways of approaching it, but that's a process of like produce and eliminate, that you're working constantly on this one thing. Whereas wedding photography, you're circling a hurricane.
Right. I
It's
watch them at weddings, and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't know what to do.
No.
Did you get the photo of our grandmother? And it's
No,
like, oh my gosh. No, I didn't.
You'd have to have, for me, I'd have to have a really intense producer, like
Yeah.
just pointing me at like, capture the grandmother,
Right.
capture the, now capture this
Exactly.
camera. Okay, I can do that, but I can't keep all that in my mind going at the same time. And
well, and that's a great thing. As a full-time photographer at this point, I'm like, I know what the settings are, right? If you want me to capture this, but the stress of being in that fluid environment, whereas
it's a different deal.
Yeah, it's a different deal. I mean, you have some lifestyle shots in your work that I really admire.
It's such a
huge
controlled,
fan.
it's such a controlled edition though.
Right.
It's like we've done everything else and then we look at the frame and we're like, all right, I think someone right here is going to be good doing this. Someone there doing that is going to. It's not like just Jimmy and Bobby and Susie and they're dancing and I have to run around and find that moment. It's still a totally, I'm still playing God and saying, thou shalt add people here.
Yes.
Now do this, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again.
The worst is when you don't really know, though. I've had clients, as someone that's creative, sometimes I can be spacey about things, right? What is a benefit to me in so many situations is also my mind thinking of so many different things at the same time. So someone says, do you want this plant right here? And I've learned, yes, I do. And then if I change my mind, I just move it, But with with the wedding photography and whatnot, I can see the stress of that, me just not being able to focus,
So what do you think of your creative process? Do you have any idea how you work and why? Like why do you like that? It's such a it's just a whole subjective take on visually looking at stuff for a whole day, and it's just such a mystery to me. Like, it's not a empirical thing in any way, shape, or form. It's just this weird kind of like, I like it, I don't like it, I like it, I don't like it. Why?
Who knows? Because you can know the rule of thirds or 0-point perspective, something like that, but still.
To me, that's knowing those rules is like starting dead on.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, frame up the room, just square it. All right.
Right.
You've accomplished that. Now break away from that if it makes sense. Break that rule. You know? And to know those rules is good, but if you can know them and break them intentionally to say something, then that's when things start. Like, if I look at fine art photography, it's not interesting to me unless it's confusing. Mm-hmm. Like,
what do you mean by that?
Well,
I said but.
If things, especially with photography, because it is such a, obviously, here is an extremely literal representation of, it's a photograph. Like, if you were standing there and, they took it with a 50 lens, it's going to be pretty much the exact thing you'd see.
Yes.
So, what I do with architectural photography is, basically just, you're doing everything you can to make this design space or exterior look as absolutely best as it can through composition, lighting, styling, all of that. There's a lot of lying going on and everything else, but it's advertising, it's sales, and then in post you're doing all that, blah blah blah.
Right.
Now, fine art photography is a different thing. You're creating simply an emotion that has some voice, search for truth, and vision behind it that should be communicated. And if it's fine art photography and I can tell what's going on immediately, it just doesn't have as much it doesn't have enough twist to engage the rest of my mind to figure it out. Right?
Yeah, it's pretty one-dimensional, pretty simple. I mean, not the actual photo, but the concept of what you're looking at.
Like, if everything can be in focus and you can tell what everything is, but there should be some dimension in there for me that's extremely confusing, as in something's really out of place.
Right.
Like, it's art, And like, I have one of the first, kind of test runs I did with this new camera. I went and shot my wife and son riding horses at the beach. And
I love that photo.
yeah, and it's
That
a
is great.
confusing
It's a
little
great photo.
because this horse is just like
Floating.
its legs are collected under it.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't look like it's moving fast,
Right.
but it just looks like the horse had jumped up, collected its legs underneath it.
Right.
And my wife's in this perfect posture. She's not like leaning forward. There's
She crushed it.
yeah.
Yeah. So did you.
Well, it's just, to me, it's like just a little like, whoa, wait a minute,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and just that little bit of, whoa, wait a minute, is just kind of that, you know, that gentle, nice T-bone in your day
Yeah.
that just kind of makes you like, oh, that's interesting.
That's
and then
what I
the
love
rest
about
of
the
your
work.
day, something
Yeah.
odd happened, and it does kind of make you take the rest of the day differently. I don't.
Yeah.
For someone who can't really string words together well, that's
You're
about as
doing-
much as
yeah,
I can
yeah,
say.
You're doing great. You're doing great. You know, with the question before, the difference between real estate and commercial photography is, when I go into a commercial shoot, it's completely different from real estate. You know, usually with real estate, I have the whole day. Even though it's fast paced and there is a different thought going into getting the end product, you know, with commercial photography, it's much slower and much more drawn out. You know,
Yeah, there's a lot more brand vision and
Right.
people that have that there was a lot of intent in the visuals that you're looking to pull out of that and communicate to their next client.
Right.
Whereas with real estate, you're looking to show the amenities. And it's, to me, when I did shoot real estate, it would be far more informational. There's, you know, a sliding scale between informational and emotional, right? And it was a little skewed towards information because you do want to talk about these amenities, but you do want to still create that welcoming and wonderful feel, obviously. But yeah, it's and each project probably just requires that different, you know, dial setting on
That's
that scale. Maybe.
Yeah, you've got to approach it just a little bit, you know, quite differently. You know, with the commercial work, you do have somewhat of a luxury where, okay, I'm going to do a day shoot and I'm going to get 6 shots today, right? And let's say each shot takes you an hour and a half or something like that. So then you plan out the different areas, you know, when the sun's going to be best or when you think the sun is going to be best.
Right.
And there's been times where I'm like, oh, it's definitely 11 o'clock. This is it. And you get in there and you're like, oh, man, I didn't know it was going to be that high.
Unless it's a bathroom or a kitchen that would accommodate it, I generally just don't like any direct light coming in.
Oh, it's great if you don't. I mean, you know, and that is also a big influence. The difference is, you know, because with real estate, you are obligated to get these more encompassing, wider shots, you know, whereas with commercial, you can sometimes focus in, you know, with like a 24 millimeter lens versus, you know, with real estate, I'll usually use that large 14 to 24 millimeter lens, which is a massive, very cool Nikon lens. I know we're not part of the same camp on that, and I'm obviously feel like an outsider sometimes. Everybody, you know, Canon is a big, for architectural photography, it's a big deal.
Yeah. I've recently found, I was going through someone's website that had contacted me, and they had this really nice image as I was going through that was kind of on this arm of a chair, arm of a couch, and over a balcony or something. And I was like, oh, that's a really nice image. 4 or 5 images later, exact same image, exact same composition. It was just uncropped. It was the full image, and it was a horrible image.
Why would they do that? Do you think there's a
Just bad choice, poor
bad
taste.
choice. Yeah, yeah. I know.
No, I think they just thought that the wider image had validity to be on there as well. In my opinion, it didn't. The other one was a really great image. I mean, it caught my eye, but the wider one didn't, and that made me realize, like, cropping even after you shoot is just such a, you know, it's really important. I'm doing a lot more of that recently, and that's a lot of the, you know, self-deception I told myself to get this different camera is that
you need that camera to make it
yeah,
happen.
because I can crop in
Yeah.
so much more if I want.
Right.
So, I mean, really, we have a client that is requiring us to use medium format and everything else. So there's that as well. I could rent, but then I'm not going to be familiar with the camera.
Right.
So
Yeah, you
know,
show up on site. You're like, I just
hold on, let me keep pushing buttons. And
how does this thing turn on?
Yeah.
It's only got a manual. Yeah.
but so yeah, I'm excited to start to work on that aspect of it as well.
I could imagine
more and I'm constantly with my Canon, I'm doing stitching, you know, and it produces so much more work in post.
Right.
And like, again, Tim and I were just going through some stuff, and I just kept looking at it thinking, yeah, we could shrink this frame and you know, crop in and be a lot better. So
yeah, I spend a massive amount of time in post-production, but you know, you learn a lot when you're in there.
oh yeah,
And, I need a chiropractor because of it, but you know,
I had sent Tim something a while ago that it's like this whole chair that
I
you
know.
sit in, it
I
has
wanted
the screens and you lean back. And
yes.
I was like,
I mean,
Tim,
it's going to
you'd
save
love
us,
this, wouldn't you?
We need to get that. We need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I told Kate, my girl, I said, we at some point we'll have to incorporate this into our house because, or you know, at some point I'll have someone help me processing. But do you how much time would you say when you sit down and process photos or
Me?
get into post production?
Personally, now myself, very, very little.
Yeah.
I'll go through with Tim, like, so I started out doing all of it myself and developed a look and feel, but I'm just honestly not the guy that is going to learn all the ins and outs of that technical program that's going to allow you to achieve that much better aesthetic. So I would make myself do it because I knew I had to. But I realized I need to get to a point where I can pay someone who has the ability and the desire to work in this manner and to make these things look great, and it will only add to what I'm doing. So I waited until I had enough work to where I felt like I was going to explode, and then put money aside to pay someone to come in, and then hopefully I can justify that increase in expense and everything else. And I got one guy to come in and do that, who's, you know, an amazing post producer and everything else, but I did not manage the situation well, and so that relationship and everything didn't work out. But I learned from it, and going into the next guy I found, who is still with me now, Tim, it worked so much better because of the things I learned, and because Tim's just extremely skilled at what he does. He doesn't need, you know, hardly any management from me. I'm a horrible person manager.
Oh,
anyways.
you are? Okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no,
yeah.
I don't. And so we had some time of just basically, Tim had done a lot of work in other areas of post-production, but not as much in architectural post-production. And so there was a bit of a learning curve, but not that much.
Yeah, because I could see those being very different. You know?
Oh yeah, it's so much more dealing with these hard lines of high contrast and everything else, and color representation from color casts and stuff that you try and avoid and capture. But yeah, today I will get back from a shoot and I basically hand the cards to Tim, and he knows to just pick the composition middle of the bracket and put them together into a contact sheet, and basically hit autocorrect for most everything to send to the client to choose from. Like, all right, let's post-produce these 10 images. And Tim then, from us working together for the years that we have, he knows how to get it to about 90% of where it needs to be, where I would like it, and then we sit down and go through them at that point, and then I'll kind of say, we need to add a little bit of gradient here, vignette here, or let's take this out, put that in, let's switch out the lifestyle. You know, and that process, just depending on the project, can take a lot of time, or it can be something that, you know, is just like, these all look great, let's move on. So
well, that would be a nice outcome.
No, I mean, it's a huge expense to take on as a business to
Oh, I
have an
bet.
employee, but to have that added layer of expertise and ability is a huge benefit to your client.
Oh, I can see that. I mean, especially your well-being as well. This summer, for instance, I was doing, I don't know, 5 to 10 shoots a week, and just.
That's a huge amount of work.
I know.
And
If
at
there's a
some point,
photographer
you're
watching,
gonna
they're like, "What?"
You're gonna start dialing back on your quality in post-production
Right.
if you're not,
Yeah.
or you're gonna, not get enough rest, and your ability to produce on
Right.
site what you need is going to be taken away from.
Oh, definitely.
So you go to that red line, and then you
Mhm.
say, all right, I need to invest now in a way to be able to do more of this, but in a healthy and effective
Right.
and high quality manner.
Yeah.
So
And that is where I'm at, after this summer. So, for people that are not photographers or don't know, 5 to 10 shoots is a ridiculous amount to try to accomplish in one week. And, but I hit that stride in my career where I was providing clients the product that they were looking for. They were telling their friends, they were calling me. And as a business owner, that's so exciting. You want to continue to say yes.
Oh, as a sole proprietorship,
Right.
working as a creative,
Yes.
God forbid you ever say no to anything.
I know. Tell me about it. Well, that's why I was
like
saying
if I
before.
say no to this, I'm going to starve and be
Yeah.
homeless. It's really difficult.
I've had there's been some asks that I've really been on the line about, do I take this job? Do I not? And I think also, just to celebrate that, when you hit that level as a photographer, it's like, oh my gosh, I've started creeping towards the percentage of people that actually have success in this field. And, thank you to all my clients. I'm sure you feel the same, but it's just like, oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, every time I would get any job, it's like, here's a chance for me to knock this out of the park.
Right.
And if I don't swing for the fence, I'm not doing what I need to do. And yeah, and so it's extremely difficult to say to someone who wants you to shoot something like, I don't want to take your money, and I don't want to go be creative for a day, you know? And like, why on earth would you not do that?
Right.
Well, you have to start to think about the entirety of your life. For one, like, do you have kids? Should you be spending time with your children and your wife?
Right.
Should you maybe go for a jog or work out occasionally? You know, there's like all these things that you have to moderate.
You do. And that's
super hard when you're constantly thinking, this is an extremely hard thing to be successful at.
Right.
And when you are there, it's very, very difficult to not think, I'm just lucky.
Right.
I'm just lucky. I'm not actually skilled.
Right.
I'm not actually good at this. I'm not actually any of that. I'm just lucky.
Right.
That's going to be the voice in your head.
Definitely.
That's going to make you keep taking every single job, no matter what. And I suffer from that big time. And one of the worst jobs I've ever photographed, not as in the performance that I did, but the quality of the job, like the absolute worthlessness for me to even be there to photograph this thing. As far as like innovative design goes, right?
Sure.
I did probably 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this for how many years?
Yeah.
Now, that being said, they, approached me and like, will you do this? And I was like, I do not want to go shoot that. So I'll just put a big number on it. That's what I use to do that.
That's what I do with videos.
And they kind of came back mid-range and like, all right, well, geez. I guess, we'll meet in the middle and, I'll do this. And so
I know that feeling.
I'm happy to have the work. It didn't take me that long, and they got, a far better representation of their project than they probably would have gotten from a lot of other people. Everyone around benefited from it, but it was not work that fed me creatively.
Right.
So I paid a cost in that manner in doing that. Was it worth it? I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to think through.
It's almost like I've had like some scenarios where you want to reach out and be like, you don't need to give me photo credit on any of this.
Oh
Just
no,
you do your thing with it. I'll take,
Yeah.
pay
Yeah,
me for my
no.
time, but just,
yeah. It's a very weird thing. It's to sell your subjective experience.
Right.
It's what you're doing.
Well, and just like the voice you were talking about, I have that too. And, even on some shoots, I'll provide the clients with the final product. And when I hit send, I literally think to myself, this is it. This is the end of our relationship. Right? You've probably had these moments, right? And then guess what I get for an email back, right?
These are great.
These are fantastic. My client, I cried when I looked at these. This is exactly what I envisioned. Like, you are so talented. And an hour ago, I was saying to myself, well, I'm not going to get this client again.
Right.
It's crazy.
But at this, as difficult as that is to live with,
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's the voice in your head that
Right.
makes you scared to walk through the woods at night.
Right.
Because for however many eons, that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
You don't go out in the
You
woods
don't
at
do
night.
it. Yeah.
And so you build up this thing that tells you, like, don't swim in alligator ponds, and but at some point you do have to leave the cave to go get the food, and so it's this thing riding on your back to, like, you got to do this. And now, like, all those survival instincts and everything else, how they apply in this weird way of, like, don't ever say no to getting that money to do this, because so it's a really, really weird thing that you can get to, like, the point where I'm at or where you're at, and say, like, you can say stuff like this where don't quite focus so much on the money and more focus on the philosophy and vision of what you do with your work.
There's a certain fund for that.
Who's still, like, clawing to actually get someone to pay them money to do anything,
Right.
to hear that is just like, because I remember.
But you had to go through that to get to where you're at.
Of
right?
course.
And
so that's why I hesitate even saying this kind of stuff. But
Right.
like, I remember buying the Eric Almus CD.
Oh, yeah?
Do you know who Eric Almus is?
No, I don't.
He's an advertising photographer who does a really great job.
I mean, of course I do.
You're right.
Yeah.
He doesn't shoot architecture and stuff. But anyways, he has a really neat look and feel, and I was interested in his process and everything. And he kept downplaying all this stuff that was technical. But all of that technical stuff and how he did it gave me a roadmap to his vision of how I could at least, like, all right, that's how I make my images look like his if I want to, right?
Definitely.
And he kept kind of pushing that aside, saying, it's not
it's no
about
big
this
deal.
technical stuff.
Yeah.
It's about the vision you have. And I kept at my position at that point saying, I don't know the vision I really have, because I don't even know how to create it and then react to it. You know?
It's probably infuriating at that stage in your
there's
career.
just some kind of, scale of progression of a photographer that you have to work through to come to peace with the amount of work you do, the amount of creative energy that you're able to retain, how much of that energy you want to spend and not retain to get continued work and everything else.
Right. And I get that mindset too. The mindset of, if at your point in your career, which I someday hope to get to, but at the same point, at the point in my career, I'm doing thousands of hours of photography a year. But very fortunate. And so I can see how, it's like, oh, I really don't, I just get in there and I do it. I have no,
that
but
is,
for the first time picking up a camera, they're like, well, what do you mean you don't know how you do it?
I occasionally will be shooting and I'll think, geez, I hope no one figures out how easy this is. Because I'm going to be out of a job. Or I can't tell people how I do this because anyone can do it. Then I'll be out of a job. But then you try and tell people how to do it.
Yeah.
And it turns into like 6 hours of, well,
Right.
why did you do this? Because of that. Why did you do that? Because of this.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize that there is just so much going on
Right.
to actually get that very specific X factor that you have translated into that frame. There's so much going on that actually translates into that.
Oh, definitely. Do I use a polarizing filter? Do I not? What neutral density filter? Like all
Well,
these,
yeah, but I mean,
yeah.
even like, why did you set the camera at that height? Why were you not a little to the left? Why were you not a little to the right? Why was that glass there? Why was this here? Why was that there? Why does the light have this tone? Why is it that harshness or not that? Like all of those things play into a singular vision of you sharing what you see. And it just does not boil down to an index finger hitting a trigger button. You know?
Right.
So being honest with yourself and realizing your own value is difficult when it's so easy to just capture an image. You know, it's, you know, you don't have to do like a huge view camera setup with, 3-minute exposures, and like the technical hurdles are done. You know, we're not in that realm anymore.
Yeah.
It's creativity, vision, and the ability to manipulate light and composition and add the human element in what we do. That is the value. And it's the subjective experience that translates through your life into that frame that is the value that people pay for.
Right.
So it's a hard thing to admit that to yourself and to stick to your guns and say, no, I am valuable, and I can justify this fee. That's
right. Yeah, and it feels, there's one photographer. There's 3 photographers that probably I would say I do seek professional advice from, and that would be, one would be Mike Kelly, who featured you in his blog. He's a great guy. And then Tony Roseland and Barry McKinsey, right? And I might not, being dyslexic, sometimes my pronunciation is, but they're close enough. And, so those guys, the 3 guys, they all have a focus on real estate architecture, things like that. And they'll give some more technical advice that I found helpful when I was developing, my technical side. Right, which really didn't change my creative side. I still had an idea of what I wanted, but the question was,
well, it's kind of like artists talking about paintbrushes.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
no, that's a great analogy.
Cameras are much more complex, and I get that.
Yeah,
but you don't want to be a technician.
No,
you don't want to get paid as a technician.
I get a lot of joy from looking at the beauty. Like when I look at some photos on the wall over here, you guys can't see it, but I get joy out of seeing those. Seeing the composition, the perspective, how things are set up. It's just, I feel good, and I'm chasing that feel good feeling.
Now to push back on my technical comment there, I am.
Retracting.
Well, not retracting.
I know, I'm
I
kidding.
admit that my value, the thing I charge for, has nothing to do with my technical capabilities. And to know that helps you focus on the things that are most important of what you're getting paid for, right? Now, the technical stuff is important. You cannot have a degradation of the quality of your work because of the technical side of it. And I extremely enjoy all the technical crap.
Oh yeah, I'm a big nerd.
I'm like, I remember when cell phones used to have a big turnover, as far as like you'd have to earn a whole new deal every time you got a new cell phone.
Yeah, like a Nokia
and I would be
wooden
so
one,
excited to get this new cell phone, and I'd figure everything out. And then once I figured it out, I'd have this little drop in my emotions of like, well, I figured it out. I guess I'll just put it in my pocket.
Yeah, maybe use it for calling people.
Yeah, right.
It's
so
a tough life.
The technical side of it is fun to me, but it also, anyone who's not me or you or people like us involved in this kind of thing, just bores them to tears.
Yeah.
They don't care, and they don't care to pay for it.
Right.
Unless they really know the field. Like if you're talking to people in an ad agency. And
I love that experience when you get a client that they know exactly what you're worth, you know, versus the client that's like, oh man, you're going to charge this? I don't know, you know. Then you got the other client that's like, that's great. Send me an invoice. You're doing an awesome job. Love working with you.
No, that's
You
that's
know?
really nice, and
Yeah.
it's nice to get to a point in your career to where, you know, you can just send people a quote as a means of telling them to buzz off.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a fund that you create for that.
well,
Yeah.
I have people that still contact me about, like, we're looking for 30 to 40 images, and we
Yeah.
have, you know, and it's going to be, you know, 2 to 3 hours away, and we have a set budget of like $1,200. And it's like,
Nice. Yeah.
you know, you think of the time involved traveling and everything else.
Right.
You're literally earning less than minimum wage,
Definitely.
and you have overhead of health expenses, all of that stuff. And it's just,
Right.
and so at some point, I have many sarcastic emails where I break down my costs for the day.
Right.
And then I'll like put in how much, you know, like these are just the money out of my pocket
Yes.
to do what you want me to do.
I don't think a lot of people see what happens after or what happens before to prepare
Right.
for these jobs, you know. And I've looked at that too, and I've hit really low numbers, and I over time they kind of average themselves out, but you know, it might be a minimal job where I find myself getting down to a very small number for an hourly wage, you know, because I'll put in 12 hours.
Right.
12 hours processing or in post-production. I can get compulsive.
Right.
That is a negative that I work on, but I can put 12 hours into post-production
Oh, yeah.
and still not be happy. You
Well,
know?
it's what will, that I found, one of the most difficult things I found in starting out and improving what I'm doing and still doing was finding people who could give me legitimate input. Because
Right.
if it was anyone in my family, it was like, oh, that's wonderful.
You are
Because-
doing great, Trent.
Right.
You're
you
just
know?
the best.
So I'm the one oddball in most any circle, I guess, that would be like, that's kind of crap.
Yeah, no, I hear even
And then
recent,
my son's
yeah.
like, you don't like my drawing?
Yeah,
I
those
wouldn't,
are
I wouldn't
great.
do that to my son. I've learned
Yeah.
enough
Yeah.
in the last, I don't know, however long to not do that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
it was very difficult to find people who could tell me, like, this one has interest, that doesn't, from my perspective.
Yeah.
You know, they help you eliminate your babies, you know.
Right.
And that's a really hard thing to find as you progress, but it's an extremely valuable thing, and to approach your own work extremely critically, as
Right.
as it seems you are.
Oh, definitely. That's
you
why
know,
I look
to-
older than I probably am. Yeah.
To
25.
internalize those failures is extremely valuable, as far as keeping them as reminders as you work. Like, oh, when I did this, the results were that I didn't appreciate. Don't do that again.
Right.
So I've had the experience of surfing and thinking I was doing really well.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, someone was taking video, and I'd look at it and be like, ooh, I
Look
look
at
like
that
a scared
nerd.
old man.
Yeah.
That's very stiff.
Oh, geez.
But like, I'd look at my, you know, you look at like a ballerina who knows what they're doing, and it's amazing. And then you look at someone like trying to be like a ballerina, and it's like, oh, they
Okay.
must be crippled or
Yeah,
something.
they're
What's
working.
going on?
They're working on it.
But by getting that feedback when I was surfing, I'd see like things I was doing, or, you know, moving my arms. They used to call me the wounded seagull.
Sounds beautiful.
Yes.
Trent.
But I'd like start to, you know, do whatever it was I'd done in that video, and I'd feel like I fit into that frame all of a sudden. And I was like, oh, don't do that. You know, like, calm those arms down a bit, you know.
Right.
And just seeing that feedback and being able to accept it and legitimize it and say, yep, that didn't work well, don't do it again. And to have that in the back of your mind as a failure peanut gallery,
I've
kind
got
of like,
those. Yeah.
no, do the extra work to turn those lights off, because if you don't, it's going to look like that. You
Right.
know? So
Yeah, no, and that's one thing I do too, is I've got some images in my mind. Even recent work where I'm like, oh man, I really need to.
Well, if you're not
know.
failing occasionally due to trying, you're not progressing.
Right.
You know, if you're failing due to lack of effort, well, then you're going downhill.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right. Yeah. And you just want to do the same thing over and
can
over
I just
again.
phone this in and go home?
Yeah. That's one thing I'm always, I would say one of the more exciting things in a day-to-day, in my day-to-day work is I'm always trying to see, okay, where am I going next? You know, how am I transitioning into, you know, what my next set of photos are going to look like?
Right.
You know, are they going to look like the ones before, or am I going to bring something to change it a little bit?
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder, like as you're starting out, like I would joyfully and gleefully and immediately go shoot anything.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
And
yeah.
as I've progressed, I've become more, how you say in English?
Refined.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit more like, I don't know if I want to go shoot that.
Yeah.
And now the reason, and to like have a peanut gallery of failure in the back of your mind. So when I initially was approaching any project, I would just run and gun and gun and gun and gun.
Yeah.
And it was more of a process when I was starting out of getting back and just reviewing all my failures and the few things that like, wow, that connected with me. And if I had an image that I really loved, I would, you know, move it to my phone or wherever. And I'd just keep looking at it over and over and over for some reason. I just, you know, now I wonder, as you gain those failures that are valuable and you have them in the back of your head, every time you go to compose after that, you start out with 2, you know, but then as like 1,000 projects later, how many of those do you have in your head that are talking to you?
Yeah.
So that
So
process,
you just like fall apart.
well, no, that
I'm
process
not saying you
of
would.
capturing is much more horsepower intensive in your mind. Like you've got now 1,000 things in your head of failures that are like you're approaching a thing and you're like, all right, you know, rev up the horsepower, and before you know, say this is a photograph that I will take, you have all these filters, all these, you know, peanuts in the peanut gallery. People,
Yes.
you know, saying, all right, did you check this? Did you check this? Did you check that? This, that, this. Whereas before it was like you had one noisy little peanut up there just kind of like squeaking, and you were like, I'm just going to keep going. You know, 15 years into it, you've got way more going on, and it's a far more exhaustive process where you take fewer images, but those images, each one, are amazing. Right. That's why when you hire a young photographer, I think you can probably get a lot more images, but a lower hit rate. And I don't know. That's just me shooting from the hip. I don't know.
You're shooting in the right direction. I feel like you are anyway, because that has been somewhat of my progression as well, where at first I would photograph everything compulsively because I didn't want to miss anything.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know,
100%.
I would literally move like a few inches and
take it again.
And take another set of images.
It might do this, it might do that. You don't have the feedback from your own process for long enough to say, if I do it here, this isn't good because of that.
Right.
So I move it here and it's better because of that.
And now I have this set group of images in my mind that I know will always work, right? So, you know, when I'm approaching a certain room with a certain type of light source, I know in my mind, this, from my history, what works in this environment. So now the difficult part about that is, okay, when do I become too repetitive? You know, when do I become too bland?
I think you just always make sure you cover those bases. Right? You don't, if you skew out of those guidelines that you've created for yourself, you do it intentionally rather than accidentally.
That's right.
All.
Yeah. And I love a straight on shot. You know, it's just a 0 point perspective shot. You know, it's just a really wonderful feel to it.
I wonder why, to me, to you, and whoever else, why that is such a powerful thing.
Yeah, it just feels so good. You know, everything is just so nicely aligned, and I don't know. You know,
to me, it feels like you're almost looking down the barrel of a gun. It's very, very powerful. It's not like you're at an angle drifting or anything else. It's like it's locked in.
That's right.
You know, and so there's no ability to deny what you're looking at or something. I don't know.
Well, and there's that aspect. How far back is too far back? Like, when am I going to be really dialed in? Like, what does this look like? And I love finding that spot where you're like, this is just, yep, this is great. I can go through and I'll look at photos that I really like. And I mean, not all the time, but, you know, I'll look at past projects and say, oh, this was good. I like that. You know, and then I'll say, oh my gosh, what was I thinking with that one?
Why is this on my website?
Holy cow, I got to take that down. Yeah,
Right.
I got to work on that stuff sometimes, but I really like your dedication to social media, just to kind of flip things
Purely
back
selfish.
on you. Yeah, so you're just looking for the likes, right? Yeah.
Well, it's another thing for me that I looked at what we're doing and just as viability for business, it's good to be out there, but also I looked at the things that I valued. Conversations one-on-one for me are very, like going to a social event, like shoot me in the head.
Yeah.
Conversations like this, I get so much from them.
Yeah,
and
it's
I
great.
figured if I can, some of the best things that I've ever done for my business have been things where I win and the people I'm interacting with win, and somehow someone else win. You know?
Yeah, it's
So
someone
to
can
me,
listen to this and get something out of it.
yeah,
maybe.
like if I can contribute some type of good conversation to social media that other photographers or whoever else can benefit from, great. And it serves me well, great. So again, it's selfish, but with good intent.
Yeah. Well, it's a great product, you know, and people that are just starting out, I mean, you know, there's a real benefit to be able to watch this type of conversation and say, like, what do their rambling minds? I'll speak for myself.
All right,
I can go all day long, so
Yeah.
watch out. But you know, so what is it like in there? Like, what are they?
Now, I
you know,
guess
thinking?
there is far more value to that than I'm really remembering. Because I remember when I decided, first of all, when I decided I was going to be a photographer, I come from a very
That day,
not creative economy family. All right, it's much more service-oriented family, right?
Sure.
And I told my dad, and he laughed, and he said, "You're never going to be able to support a family with photography."
Right.
And then the great kicker is that I think I earned more money than him in my first year.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Right. That's a tough thing about, you know, when you first start to make it, you're like, oh my gosh.
It's kind of like
this
telling,
is what?
yeah, in your late 20s, early 30s, telling
Yeah.
your family like, oh, I'm going to be a singer-songwriter. Like, you've never done this before. What do you think?
Right. Yeah.
But I forget where I was going. Oh,
No,
when I was starting out, so I tried to assist for other photographers. I tried all this stuff. Nothing was working. I could not assist for anybody. I couldn't get a hold of anyone. I didn't know how to price anything.
Right.
All of that. And so I just I figured out my own way to wing it and did it. But if I could learn, you know, by listening into other conversations about how people got from one point to another. And like, I'm at the point now where I'm, you know, just breaking into working with ad agencies that work for national brands and everything else. And that's a huge learning curve. And if I have found a few podcasts where I can listen to stuff like that and learn from it. And that's very beneficial. But yeah, for that starting out, you know, to hear from people who've gone through it, it's a huge benefit.
Yeah, because I mean, I used to take jobs for $150, you know, and I mean, that's a lot of money, right? I mean, when you're starting out, you're like, holy cow, I'm getting paid for this.
Yeah.
But I used to take that, and when you break it down to the amount of time I would spend on these projects, you know, we're talking like a few dollars an hour, you know, especially when you start. But that said, you know, so as things progress, you start changing, and like you were saying, you know, how do you price these things? You know, what's the right way to do it? I've gone through several different phases where, you know, maybe I do per image, maybe I do per day. You know, at this point in my career,
I found architectural photography is a specifically high, generally, especially starting out, it's a higher image production animal than a lot of other, like if you're thinking of like, hey, I need someone to do this one image for, a magazine ad that I'm putting in a regional publication or whatever.
Right.
That's a different thing than like, hey, I've got a home. It's going to need 12 to 15 images,
Yes.
And so, pricing that is difficult starting out, trying to figure out like, because what realtors are going to pay is going to be completely different from what a publication is going to pay compared to what a architect is going to pay.
And they're for completely different purposes.
Yeah.
So when you have the broker, that's the real estate broker that's asking you to take photos, they're going to use this once, and that's a lot of my pricing is based on, okay, what are you doing with it? So,
Right.
And I think that's kind of universal, but, so for a broker, I'll do one thing, and it's a much lower price. And then, if you're let's say you're a developer, or an architect, and this is going to be used over and over in ads, totally different process.
Right.
Right. It's like being a team member,
Yeah.
Um,
And it's always a learning curve and an educational curve for clients that haven't worked with photographers, don't know copyright laws. There's tons
you
of,
can blow their mind if you get, if you
Yeah,
don't know,
it's-
someone
it's
doesn't
a-
know about this stuff.
It's a weird thing for them to
Yeah.
think like, no, I paid you to go and do this, and I'm going to give it to whoever I want now.
Right.
And it's like, that's not how copyright laws
Doesn't-
work.
yeah.
And I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen.
Right.
Or you can,
Right. And
go and work with someone
yeah,
else if you want.
licensing, it's like sometimes I have to stop myself. If I have someone that's brand new to the concept, I'll sometimes want to just jump in and be like, list it all off, and then realize how new it is to them. And
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
use it, but they can't. They can use it if they do this, and they can use it
Right.
for this amount of time if they want to do this.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
like
it's-
a lot of people just kind of think of it like, I paid you to build a house. It's my house now. I'm going to live in it, and then I'm going to sell it.
Yeah.
It's a different
They
thing.
don't understand they're essentially renting the photo from you.
Yeah.
You as the creator are the owner. There's, in the photography business, it's a very rare occasion that a photographer will give you full and complete ownership of a photo. I don't do it. I don't know if you've ever done it, but
I love it when people ask for it because I put
Yeah.
a price tag on it.
yeah. Oh, nice.
And then they go, "Oh, what can we do?
Oh.
Well, maybe."
yeah.
So it's an opportunity for you to be like, all right, go
Yeah.
to Getty,
Right.
source a similar image, and
Exactly.
see what they're going to charge you for something that's not your project.
Right. Right.
And you're gonna, to get full buyout rights on any image off of Getty, you're gonna be between like 10 grand and 30 grand.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like,
definitely.
this is a stock image. Like someone took that with no intent of clear vision ahead of time as far as, some specific branding or anything else. You're commissioning a very specific thing that you then want to have exclusive rights for.
Right.
Exclusivity is one thing, but then outright ownership, for infinity, is a different thing.
Completely. I mean, you could do anything with that, and
Yeah.
I've had one of my friends is a very talented photographer, but he has a 9-to-5 job, and he does Getty. He'll take photos for Getty Images, and one of his images was in a national print publication. They just bought it offline, and he got a small fee for it, and
Right.
or a payment for it, and so. It is interesting how you can transition from just supplying images to having a very specific request.
Right.
And
So I did, starting out with another friend of mine, we would give ourselves challenges.
Okay.
Like once a week or once a month maybe. To say, all right, here's a product. Go and make an ad campaign and shoot it for it.
oh, that's great.
And so we do that. And one of them, I had a friend of mine on a mountain bike doing a scorpion where he
Yeah.
went over the front wheel and it was like his face was hitting a rock and the bike was coming over the back of him. And
You're a great friend.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was actually November. It was cold, and he was
So he had a
actually
bunch
just sitting in the position.
Yeah.
But we made it look like it was movement and
Right,
stuff.
right. It's like, hey, I just need you to flip over
Right.
15 times. We'll get the shot.
So I think I paid him, something to come and do that, blah blah blah, and told him, it's going to be on social media
Yeah.
or not on a stock site.
Okay,
iStock at
yeah.
the time had just come out, and he's like, oh great, that'll be fun, cool. And so I did that, put it up there, And it ends up like coming to his front door on the cover of Nash Bar, which is a huge
Right.
bike, catalog that goes nationwide. I maybe made
Yeah.
$50 off of that, or
Right.
if that,
Yeah.
nothing. But the world becomes your market,
Yeah.
so you're able to sell those, and it's just a good creative process. But it ends up coming into his door on the front cover. He's like, oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
And then out in California, they used it on a health coverage, health insurance coverage ad on the back of a bus, where I only found out about it because a friend of mine in California saw it on the news because the bus had like run over someone and killed them.
Right.
And it was on the news. And then my friend was like, wait a minute. And like on the
Yeah.
back of the bus is... So yeah,
It's
it's weird.
wild.
If you, I always knew when I submitted those things that eventually I would run into those images
And you'd
somewhere
find them,
potentially
right.
if people bought them, and it was
Yeah.
kind of neat to like, oh, there's that.
I know. Yeah, my friend has the magazine. It's like a full page ad. It's so funny.
Yeah.
But and I don't know if they tell you when. I think they tell.
They don't have to.
Yeah, they don't have to.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
And there's different settings you can put on there for that, and I haven't even checked the income from that. I think I have 17 images on iStock, and
Yeah.
I don't know, like every year I would get a check for like $300 or something.
Sure. Yeah.
So there's people in whole studios that approach just doing stock photography and have whole teams, and and they'll
Right.
make millions a year.
Oh yeah,
off of
setting
pushing
up.
that. And
Yeah. Setting up like a little office table with a pen and a piece of
Oh yeah,
paper.
the demographic is
Yeah.
skewing more, Hispanic, so we have to have more people here
Right.
and there, and get the models in and dress them in
Right.
lab coats, and
Yeah.
so they have to run all those different like algorithms and figure out who's buying what and why and the current trends, and then they produce photography for that and put it online and sell it. And that's one way of working, and I think it could be interesting.
Yeah.
but
Great business
just,
sense.
Yeah, not where I ended up. So.
Yeah. Well, you ended up in the right place, clearly.
Well, I mean, my
yeah.
background in architecture informs that, I think. So
When did you decide, and I know you're probably supposed to ask me the question, but when did you decide to get into photography? Like when you're at the studio and you're like,
I had two scrapes with photography before I went into photography. One was in architecture school. They were putting together a booklet to raise money to build a new building for the architecture department. And I photographed everything for it. And I thought, man, that's really fun, like doing the photography for this, finding these moments and everything. Too bad you can't make a living at it. And
Right.
kind of like,
oh,
keep
it's
going.
never going to happen.
Yeah. And then I remember in a surf publication, I read a story about this guy who lives on the southern side of Massachusetts, and he was a photographer, and I don't know what it was that he made his living shooting, but he had also shot these photos of all these different waves around Massachusetts. I read the whole article, and I was like, man, his lifestyle sounds great. He's having to actually go to different locations to photograph things,
Right.
and the way that this guy lived, and just how he was working creatively. I was like, man, that really sounds like a nice way to live, but too bad you can't make a living at it.
Right.
Just disregarding that there's someone making a living at
There
it, but it
is.
just feels
There
like
is.
it's a 1 in a million shot. And it wasn't until I just realized that I was not going to be making a living as an architect because I couldn't hack it. I just to put up with that level of minutia and clients and that intense focus on like spreadsheet type of details and construction drawing details that have to line up, that have to be everything. Like there's just an immense amount of trickle down effect and organization that I was not naturally inclined to, that made it very difficult for me to be involved in that, and to just think I don't want to go to the same spot 80% of the time of my life and do this work. That was very difficult to then say, all right, I need to walk away from the past 8 years of my life, and I just need to throw that away and start over. And I didn't know it at the time, but that's not what I was doing, but it felt
Just
like
the next
that.
step, yeah.
Yeah, it very much felt like, well, I'm just taking a master's degree in architecture, and all the education I've done to this point, and all the life experience I've had for the last 3 years working as an architect, just going to throw it away.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on. That's what it felt like. But it was during the time when you could buy and sell real estate through the foreclosure process. And so I had bought a couple buildings and was managing them and renovating them. And I just thought, like, well, I'll have my creative process be that I'm renovating these buildings into nice spaces, you know, but then enters the management part of it that's extremely stressful. That, you know, to me, I could see the potential in these buildings and make them into that, but then the management of people that lived in them was just like a nightmare for me.
Oh, sure.
My wife could do it with her eyes closed. Like,
Yeah.
she loves that interpersonal, and, you know, but to me it was horrendous. But I was doing that, and it was while I was doing that that a friend of mine that's out in California was like, you know, you've already shown that you have an interest in photography, and with your background with architecture, why don't you take a stab at that just to some degree? You know, it's a creative outlet, you know. And I think I bought and sold a property, and from the money from that, I bought my first just tripod, camera, lens, and 2 strobes.
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of started. And I don't know, I just kind of made the decision, like, all right, I am going to do this. And I look back on it now, I you know, just the lack of understanding how much of an uphill battle and difficult it could be was a great benefit.
Yeah. No, that's how when I went into it, when I first started making, getting enough jobs where I was paying my bills, you know, that was it was like, whoa,
magic.
wait a second. Holy cow. And then I went to the thought process, I might be able to ride this out for a few months, you know, before I need to get another job, you know? And then, you know, through the work, you know, just getting kind of that people would call me back, and I'm like, whoa.
The commonality I'm seeing here, though, like, people ask me a lot, like, what I want to be a photographer, what should I take in school? Or, you know, I mean, obviously you could take photography.
You could. I think about
but
that.
I don't
like, what would
think
it be like?
it's a good idea, honestly. And a lot of photo schools have closed down. I always tell people you should study the things you want to photograph, because you're showing other people how you see whatever subject it is. So if you're someone, like, I would suggest people take psychology if they want to be a person that's going to be doing portraits, you know, and then, like, art and art history to understand the composition and framing and the ideas behind how someone holds their hands, what's it mean, and facial, you know, that kind of stuff. But the commonality between you and I mean, you had this background in understanding real estate and how it sells and why it sells, and then you kind of combined it with this interest of photography, and from there you're moving on and turning that into something else. For me, the background of architecture, and, you know, we're both, you know, showing more of what we work in.
That's
we're
right.
Showing how we see it.
Yeah.
So, you know, someone who's a person who naturally has that interpersonal skill and can identify emotional situations and moods and everything else, I would recommend going, if they want to be a photographer, go into the realm of, you know, interacting with people, portraiture, family photography, wedding photography, things that are about that.
I feel like that's the biggest success for those photographers. It's about creating the mood of feeling comfortable and being yourself. And if you
Annie I think it's Annie Leibovitz disagrees with that.
Does she?
To a degree,
Sorry,
but
Annie.
I think that's her shtick. That's her thing, maybe, is that, like, it's not my deal to make you comfortable. Right. I'm here to, like, interpret you or something. I don't know.
Well, I think where I can see that being of you, I absolutely, you know, like, you're the subject that does, you know, we're separate, right? But I when I think about weddings or, you know, social events and photographing those, it's, you know, if you have an oddball kind of, like, you know, within 10 feet of you just staring at you with a camera, it's like, no, you've got to somehow find a way to become, you know, part of the scene where they're comfortable being themselves.
Right.
something maybe I could do, but I've never had an interest in.
I'm not great
Yeah.
at that.
I love that feeling that you were talking about, where, you know, it doesn't happen all the time, but it's on a regular basis. I'm in this large, beautiful space, and it's just me.
Right, and
And,
you're translating that for other people,
Yeah.
and handing that to them, which is nice. See, I would think there's probably a lot of people that would look at what we do and think that's extremely boring.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm just going to nitpick this for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, well,
you
we're
know?
probably introverts.
Extreme
know?
introvert right here. So.
Yeah. Well, you know, from psychology, so introvert, extrovert, like one of the main things about that is introverts would be great at working at, let's say, an airport, looking at the radar screen, right? Because they're so easily stimulated.
Right.
Right. So you see the little
But
blips.
at the same time,
Yeah.
that would drive me nuts to do something that
It's so yeah. It's
repetitive and
But the concept being that, you know, for us to be in that space, if you're more introverted, it's a benefit because it's more exciting than an extrovert who
Right.
needs to be in these spaces that have more excitement, more energy, and they actually gain energy.
oh yeah,
An
yeah.
extrovert gains energy from being around other people.
Oh, to watch my wife and my
Yeah.
oldest son in
Yeah.
groups and to see them after being in a group is
They're
just
like,
like,
"Yes."
oh my word, you
Yeah.
people, how do you
Right.
do this?
Right.
And they're just like, that was so much fun.
Yeah. Oh, let's do it
And
again.
I'm just like, can we go?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. I'm the same way. You know, I do just get into it and I make it happen for if I feel like I need to be at some type of event of some sort. But it takes a lot out of me. I'm exhausted after.
Oh yeah.
You know, I'm very aware of how people are reacting to me, how I'm reacting to them,
Yeah.
and there's just so much energy that's put into it.
Ugh,
You
so you
know.
just kind of go home, get in your bedroom, shut the door, and
Yeah,
cry, and-
but luckily, you know, we both have other halves that seem to be extroverts, and
Yeah, yeah.
therefore, you know, I'm brought out a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, versus closing the door and, you know,
I've
because, yeah.
found that and this might put other people off, I guess,
Yeah.
but in those situations where I'm forced to interact with people on a larger scale,
Yeah.
I just revert back to really only talking about things that matter,
Mm-hmm.
which is unpleasant for a lot of people, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, I'll challenge people, and that's probably
You start talking about global warming and stuff like that.
yeah, or I'll I'll start to ask people what they really believe
Yeah.
in settings where it's not really appropriate.
Right.
And like, it's just like, why are we wasting our time here talking about
Yeah.
the weather when,
Yeah.
you know, but normal people, that's the process, and that's how you set up and build trust
And relationship,
And
yes,
I
yes.
get that, but I don't know. There's something about me that's like, no matter how much, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I think I could trust you, I know you could be lying to me, and I'm not great
Oh,
at picking
sure.
up on people that are lying. And why don't we just be honest with each other here?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
like, you can trust me if you want. And it's such a weird thing, psychology, and it's
Yes.
very interesting. But at the same time, I'm not naturally set up to be someone who can be that. It's just not
person in
going
the crowd, that butterfly.
Well, there's not
That
going
Trent
to
butterfly.
be any veneer on this kind
Yeah.
of thing, you know.
Mhm.
Like it's just not going to happen. And if it has to happen, you'll have to do it without me.
Mhm.
So
Nice. That's good. That's good.
and
Yeah.
it's nice until you have to be married to it and
Oh,
don't get
defini-
to be
oh, sure.
social or you know, like I can be extremely critical
Mm-hmm.
nonstop, and I can complain about things nonstop. So I at least have to learn to shut up. So.
I agree with you. I've found like sometimes I'll get in big trouble because I focus on the details of a lot of things.
Yeah.
And, you know, if there's a couple empty bottles of water on the table or something, you know, for some reason that,
Do you have kids?
no, I don't.
Yeah.
So right
Brace
now I'm
yourself if
okay.
you do.
Yeah.
Hey, who left this out? Who left
Right.
that out? Why is this here? Why is that there? Why
Right.
didn't you shut this?
Yeah, why can't you just put this away, you know? I gain a lot of energy from having organization
Yeah.
on a healthy level. You know, it's not.
I do too, but I'm too lazy to do it myself. So
Yeah.
I'd rather try and make other people feel like they need to do it for
Right.
me.
Yeah.
That's not fun to live
No,
with.
no, I'm sure, Trent. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, don't videotape my house right now. If you went in there right now, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this guy's a disaster.
Yeah.
But,
If I lived by myself, I wonder what it would be like.
Yeah.
I don't know if I know I've been messy in the past, but
Yeah. Well, I live in a very small condo. I love it.
Yeah.
It's like 525 square feet. Can
Yeah,
you imagine that?
Yeah. Ooh, wow.
It's like the
That
size
is
of
tiny.
the
That's
studio.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. But it makes it very easy to, come home, clean up, get everything organized.
Right, and then relax.
And I have a storage unit that has a charging station for all my gear. Just like you have set up, I put all my gear away at the end of the day, charge everything, and then I take just a couple cards and I go up to my,
Yeah.
to my place and then I start uploading things. Yeah. So it works right now, but makes life easy.
Well, was there anything else that you had on your mind that you want to talk about that we didn't talk about? Because I am running out of time a little bit.
Oh, I could talk with you all day, Trent. So,
And I have to pee.
Oh yeah. I've been conserving the water, so I'm good. But no, I think I'm fine. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Yeah, no, it's been really interesting to talk to someone else who's going through and working with the same things, and I hope people that are listening to this who are either in the same same situation or working towards that it's a good benefit. So.
Yeah, same here. And I mean, for me, it was just great to connect with you because it's just wonderful to meet other people that are doing the same thing or doing things at a level that you appreciate.
Yeah.
To be able to chat with them. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming all the way down. It's been really informative and really delightful.
Okay. All right.
Thanks
Let's
a lot.
wrap it up. Thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the